Hello and welcome to the i3 lecture series hosted by the Masters in Digital Photography here at the School of Visual Arts. I'm Julie Graham. Our guest tonight is Destiny Mata. Destiny is a Mexican-American photographer and filmmaker based here in her native New York City, focusing on issues of subculture and community. After studying photojournalism at LaGuardia Community College and San Antonio College, she spent 2 years as director of photography programs at the Lower East Side Girls Club. Her photography has been published in the New York Times, The Nation, The Guardian, and The Culture Crush. Her solo exhibition, La Vida en Loisaida, Life on the Lower East Side, showed at the Photoville Festival in 2020. Destiny has also had her work exhibited at the International Center of Photography, Mexicarte Museum, and the Museum of the City of New York. In 2020, she was a Magnum Foundation U.S. Dispatches grantee, an award given to support photographers developing short-term visual projects related to the 2020 U.S. elections. And in 2023, she was awarded the Magnum Foundation Fellowship, which allows for New York City-based photographers to work in the Magnum Foundation office while also developing their own photographic project in the city that addresses social issues and engages with New York City communities. Destiny is currently preparing a series of documentary works continuing her exploration of the fabric of the communities around her. And in the spirit of community, in 2021, Destiny donated a print of her fabulous Man in the Kiosk to a charity fundraiser that Jeanette Beckman and I were holding. Thanks to SVA, we finally met in person at Amon Focus's talk earlier in the program. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Julie, for inviting me to speak tonight. And I want to shout out Jeanette Beckman. She's an amazing photographer and human being, but also is the link between Julie and I. And I also want to thank SVA for having us gather here tonight on this rainy night. But I was having flashbacks, even though you were like reading my bio. I'm like, wow, I did all those things. So even preparing for my presentation, I was like, how am I gonna share my journey as a photographer? How did I start and where am I going? So my beginnings, I structured the lecture into 3 chapters. Chapter 1 being family. So I come from a family of photographers. My grandfather was a part-time wedding photographer, but also had a family restaurant that all of my mother worked in. I also worked in. My mother was our own family historian. And I want to take a moment to spotlight this wonderful woman. Her name is Chayo Mata. She is my aunt. She was a fashion photographer. This was her last self-portrait that she made of herself during a Fashion Fights Cancer campaign. She is my inspiration, her drive, her passion, her energy, but also just like growing up in a photo environment with her. I got to see some of the challenges and obstacles that she endured. One being a Latina woman, being a queer woman in a male-dominated industry. So I got to see her face all of those challenges as a young person. This is Chayo and I in the street. This was her last photo shoot that she did for Fashion Fights Cancer. And then on the other end is images that I gravitated to that she made of just life in, I believe it was East Harlem. It could have been the Lower East Side, but these are the images that truly inspired me and the work that I'm making today. These are studio portraits that she made when she was alive, and I chose these images just because it just shows how strong these women are, but also reflecting on issues, that we go through as a humanity, like Stop Earth Abuse, that are some of the pins that you see on some of these portraits. This was a published work that she did for ID magazine called Angels of Harlem. Along with growing up with an amazing person and photographer and aunt, I got to see her collaborate with her friends. So one of her friends was Pat McGrath, who is now a legendary makeup artist and has her own brand. But back in the day, when they were both coming up as artists and photographers, I got to be behind the scenes and see how they collaborated together and had an idea and bring it to life. So I think that definitely inspired me and my work ethic and having ideas and making them come to life. So fast forward to me in college. This is my freshman year. I had taken my first intro to photography, film photography. So this is like one of my first strips of negative. This is the first strip of me turning the camera onto myself, but also not realizing that I would be making photos of my community and my neighborhood and looking out to my neighborhood. So this was during that time when I was barely just learning who I was as a young photographer. I also select this photo. It's very meaningful to me. It's called Creating Under Chaos. This is a self-portrait of me at 19 years old. I was probably upset that my mom probably wouldn't let me out to go to like a punk show or an art show or something. And with her own right of my room being a total mess. But also during that time I took a photojournalism class, and I remember my professor giving us an assignment to look up a photographer on the New York Times Lens blog. And I discovered this photographer. His name was Boogie. And he made a series of portraits in Bushwick public housing, just focusing on gangs. And then I realized, I live in public housing in the Lower East Side, and that's not my reality. So I'm just grateful to my mother who let me be creative and let my friends come over and write on my walls and let us get creative and artsy during that time. So this was me exploring myself and figuring out what my voice was as a young photographer. Fast forward later on, probably my second semester in college, I started pointing the camera to my neighborhood. So I grew up on the Lower East Side of Manhattan in Lillian-Walled houses, New York City's public housing. So this photo for me is really symbolic. It's not only like a reflection of what home is to me. I grew up in a very unstable living situation. So seeing these brick brown buildings are super symbolic to me. And I began using the brick buildings as a backdrop to show the people who I care about the most. So in the right-hand side is I call him my brother. That's Keith and his son, Caden. And then on the left-hand side is Zunilda, who is an amazing artist. Love her blue hair and her whole outfit. But I also wanted to change the narrative of what folks think of when they think of public housing and folks who live there. So when I made these portraits, I wanted to show folks with dignity, with respect, with love, and just show them in that light when I made their photos. Along with flipping the camera to my neighborhood, New York City, we all got our bodega, local bodega guy, and I had to make a moment of Juan, who is an amazing person, and if I don't have enough money to pay for my food, I got credit at the deli, so thank you, Juan. But also, I love this moment. I think I took this in like 2012. The pickles ain't there anymore and the bananas ain't there, but I just feel like this is an iconic New York moment, and it's one of my favorite images. So also when I was exploring myself, this photo for me was taken on my block. And I just call this photo the Bingo Ladies. But I was really shy in the beginning to approach people. And I always would walk past them because they were always having a good time. And I'm like, I need to make a photo of these amazing women just having a good time playing in the summertime. So I finally got the courage and I asked them, I'm like, can I make a photo of you? And they're like, yes, mommy. And I'm like, thank you. It was that easy. It was that easy. So that from that, moment on, just being with a group of ladies and like hanging out with them for like an hour and making photos of them, like just having a good time. Like, look at the lady, she has her tongue out, like she's having an amazing time. It really inspired me to like, I can go up to a person and ask them to make their photo, and it's not gonna be as scary as I thought it was gonna be. So I am heavily involved with my community. Like I said, I live in Lower East Side. I am really active in some of the different public art events that go on. So in this photo, it was during Family Day at Baruch Houses, and I just wanted to preserve some beautiful moments that are going on in the neighborhood that is constantly going through change because of gentrification. Fast forward through my college years, I ended up going to study at San Antonio Community College in Texas. My aunt studied there, and she was like, if my professor's there, you gotta go and learn from him. So I reached out to the school, and he was still there, and I went and studied with him. But during that time, I loved that I was able to work alongside my grandparents. So this is a photo that my grandmother is showing me of her flipping tortillas in our family restaurant that has been there in the neighborhood for 35 years in San Antonio. So I got to work alongside my grandmother as a dishwasher, and during my time studying at San Antonio College and working on the college newspaper, I would carry my camera and document my abuelita, who was my muse, and she is known for making delicious empanadas, so I had to make sure that I commemorated her and made a portrait of her with her empanadas. But also during that time, I explored making like day in the life videos, like vignettes, and I dedicated a video to my grandparents' restaurant and the local businesses around the neighborhood. So I'm gonna show you all a short 3-minute video called Working for Mi Gente, working for my people. And yeah, I'm gonna share that with you all really quickly. Yeah. Chapter 2 is called The Way We Were. Fast forwarding from studying at San Antonio College, I ended up back in New York City, working a lot of odd jobs and kind of like what's going to happen now after college. And then a friend of mine was like, would you ever be interested in teaching a photo workshop to middle school kids in the summertime? And I'm like, sure, I've never done that before, but let me try. So I ended up teaching a workshop over the summer and at the Lower East Side Girls Club, which was like down the block from where I grew up. So it was like full circle moment. And then from that moment on, which was probably in like 2015 to now, present day, I have never left that job. So during that time, I had to figure out like work-life balance, and that led me to documenting live music, underground, punks of color shows. But also during all of that time of college, I had amazing mentors that guided me. Ricky Flores, who is a Bronx photographer, photojournalist, was one of those folks, and introduced me to Deborah Scherer, who published my first book called The Way We Were. And at first it was supposed to be a zine, 25 pages, and then it turned into a 400-page book because she was like, there's just too many photos. How many shows did you go to? So when the pandemic happened, we had the time to like really just dive into my archive of going to all of these shows. But I had to figure out like, what was I doing? Why was I so obsessed with taking photos of underground punk shows? Well, growing up in New York City, I went to a lot of shows at Tompkins Square Park, a lot of punk shows, but going to those shows was like predominantly like white, male, and the bands were not a reflection of, you know, black and brown folks playing. So my friend invited me to one of his shows called Punks of Color, and after that night, it was like a dream. I'm like, I wish I had this in middle school when I was going to shows. So I became obsessed, and I began going to every show that I could go to. So I tried to like dissect like 6 years of going to shows nonstop and then working with youth. What does it all mean? So this web is like Hydropunk, which is a collective that was formed in the Bronx by young people creating spaces because they didn't want to go to Brooklyn and see a punk show, so they made shows out in the Bronx. Club A's Club Anarchy, which was a mutual aid group of punks that would have punk shows to raise money to like feed, you know, folks in need. No Flowers for White Powers was an LGBTQ-focused collective that was creating shows for folks like that. And then there was Punks of Color, who were just creating spaces for black and brown artists and musicians to perform. So taking you underground, so this is at Heck in Bushwick. And going back to my aunt, who's a fashion photographer, when she passed, she left me her equipment, her pro photo lighting equipment that was sitting in my closet for years until I was like, I don't have a bright enough flash like when I go to these shows and it's so dark in there. I'm like, I have this idea, like what if I take her lighting equipment that I don't really know how to use and just experiment with these punks that I'm meeting. And so I brought her equipment to this punk show, and all these young people helped me bring the equipment, heavy equipment down there, and we created a bunch of awesome portraits and whatnot. But I'm introducing you to Jason, who is in the red. He was my guide through finding all of these shows. He would text me and he was like, hey, there's a show at so-and-so place. And I would end up there. But the most magical part was seeing him as a 17-year-old and then years later become a punk himself and performing to a huge crowd of his peers. Just seeing like the confidence and like seeing the support that everyone gave each other like got him to where he is at now. So his music's awesome. I'm a big fan. Deborah's a big fan. He makes beats off of a Nintendo DS and sings about fuck the Ramones. And then there's also Kembo, who's on the right, is also now in a band. So just seeing like the evolution of these young people and just like seeing them just voice their voices out there real loud and proud is just like an amazing thing to see throughout this whole process of shooting Punks of Color. I also wanted to highlight this amazing group of collective Hydropunk, because they're the ones who organize these shows. They're the ones who got the musicians out there. They're the ones who fundraise. So I definitely wanted to make sure that I documented these folks. Along with the process of making this book, like I had to bring in some of my friends. So Daisy, who's actually sitting right over here in the pink, that's her artwork right there, Daisy Ruiz. She made a lot of the Punks of Color flyers for emo night in the Bronx. So I wanted to collaborate with her on this book just because we were both there in time. So this is a drawing or illustration she made, referenced from one of my photos, or a couple of my photos. This is more of her amazing illustrations that were featured in the book. So along with going to these shows, a lot of the spaces don't exist anymore. So I'm thankful that I documented this period of time. So this is a DIY space called Club Anarchy in Brooklyn, off of Myrtle Broadway. And in that space, there was shows that went on, but also our skateboarders made their own like skate ramp to skate in while the shows were being played. So with the Profoto flashlights, I brought all that equipment with me. Thankful for the young people that helped me bring that equipment up like many flights of stairs. And this is more of a Club Anarchy and what it looked like inside the space. And then I became obsessed with making portraits. Like I was just, every person who was at the show is so beautiful, and I'm like, I need to capture their beauty through photography. And before I was like, I don't like fashion photography, and here I am making, I guess, fashion-y type portraits. But there was so many portraits that I made, so in the book we ended up creating a lot of collages of different portraits that I made throughout the various different shows that I went to throughout 6 years of my life. And here are more collages. But the book was out in the world, and I ended up getting a DM on Instagram from a New York Times editor from the Metro section when businesses were opening back up. They were writing an article about nightlife, and they reached out to me about making portraits of underground punk. And they're like, just do your thing, find a punk show. We want to publish it in this article. So they asked 40 photographers to go out and document nightlife. And it was cool. They published it online. Like, it was a great opportunity. And then the editor was like, yeah, it's going to be in print. And I'm like, oh, cool. Like, my photo is probably not going to make the print. There was 40 photographers. I don't think my image is going to make print. And then I got the paper, and there's my photo, like, 2-page spread. I'm like, whoa! That blew my mind. The punks are alive and well in the New York Times. And then recently, I got an opportunity to do a campaign for a boxing gym called Overthrow Boxing in collaboration with Everlast, which is a boxing brand. I guess they make boxing things. Anyways, this was interesting because I almost didn't take the gig because I had to do it on my terms. So I'm like, it's punks, it's, this is my heart and soul here. Like, I was like, if only I have to cast this. Like, if you don't let me cast this, then I cannot do this. I would be making a disservice to my punks in New York City. So they were like, yes, you can cast it. And I was like, okay, here we go. So I casted a bunch of punks who I have met along the way to model their clothing for this campaign, Forever Lasts in the Boxing Gym. So these are some photos we made together. I was just hanging out on the street and having fun and making photos. So this is what was the product of that. And this is in front of the gym. More images from the shoot. And shout out to Eddie, who's here, who was my assistant, who like did the heavy lifting and was working all day. So thank you for your help. More images from that shoot. All right, chapter 3, taking y'all back to the Lower East Side. So, you know, I've been making photos and finding my voice as a photographer and documenting my neighborhood since I was in middle school. And I was like, I want to make something beyond collaborative and not just be me making photos of my neighbors and what have you. I want to make something even more special. But it was inspired, before I get into that, it was inspired by a yearbook that I made with high school students at City As High School, which is an unconventional high school that I actually graduated from. So I was able to be a teaching artist, and we created their yearbook for the class of 2022. And you know, it was that COVID era, so I was like, you know, we're not gonna make a yearbook on a screen on Photoshop. Like, we're gonna make a yearbook inspired by like punk DIY zines. So I just brought in a bunch of my zines that I had as inspiration, and they were into it. And we made everything by hand. We cut out photos, we took photos, doodled onto photos, and this was some of their creations for their yearbook. So it was like mixed media, like photo and drawing kind of thing, which inspired me to do what I'm currently working on is a Lower East Side yearbook, but through the lens of folks who grew up in public housing in the Lower East Side. It's an ambitious project, and when I tell people, I'm like, oh, I'm making a Lower East Side yearbook, they're like, what's that? And I'm like, I don't know, we're gonna figure it out. So it's been a collaborative idea and project, and Aman, who's here, has been with me since the beginning, the inception of this project. So shout out to Aman, who is an amazing artist, and in a review, I've learned so much from him, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. But along with just like preserving our stories and celebrating ourselves and our history in the neighborhood, I think right now a lot of people don't really realize, like folks that I know, don't really realize that our homes are in jeopardy who live in public housing. So just for a little context, I'm just gonna read this aloud so you guys can know what's going on. So nationwide, public officials have been pushing new plans for public housing, including rental assistant demonstration, called RAD, and the blueprint/trust. While we are told these plans will save our homes and preserve public housing for future generations, evidence from a growing number of tenants, legal advocates, and researchers suggests that these plans would end public housing and create new risks for tenants. So for me, this yearbook is also bringing awareness to our homes being in jeopardy and just spreading, you know, what is happening and how it may affect, you know, your home and your housing rights. So along with that, I've been educating myself on going to rallies, going to town halls. So these are some photos that I made while going to those events. So I made a collage because it's chaotic and it's really hard to understand what's going on. So I really wanted to depict that through the busyness in the collage. But yeah, I love some of the signs that folks are holding, like public housing is on life support. It's a crime of the century. Keep public housing public. So along with it being an amazing, I guess, project and preserving our history, I really want to get the word out there about what is happening to our homes. So I had to make, like, not that I had to make, but I made examples of what the yearbook could look like, and I was experimenting with collaging. So actually the lettering that you see here, Daisy actually made, so we were all collaborating again. And then that's a photo of my building that I grew up in, juxtapose the city skyline in black and white that's bordering the page. So during the process of getting folks involved in this yearbook, Aman and I went to the senior building at Baruch Houses, and I invited some of my neighbors to come and bring photos to share. We recorded audio of them reflecting about whatever photos they had brought with them. So Rosa, my neighbor, and her two girls came out, and they started, one of her girls, Sunday, loves to draw. So she made this drawing based on a photo that her mom brought with her. And this is the end product of her amazing drawing, and this is the photo that her mother brought of her when she was younger in, I don't know what, it was the 80s, I don't remember exactly, but these are just examples of what the yearbook may look like. But yeah, that was our first outreach to folks to get involved in the project. So here's Rosa as a teenager with her sister. This was her first summer job working in public housing. Her mom made this photo. She was really proud, like, oh, my two daughters are working summer job. And then Rosa was like, never again. Like, we just picked up trash all summer. But she's like, at least my mom was proud. So if you hear the audio, like hearing her voice, it's just next level. Aman knows. Along with folks like submitting photos, we're going to see a lot of art in this yearbook. This was contributed by Cochise, who was born and raised in the Lower East Side. He submitted 3 pages of his life story, kind of just reflecting on living in the neighborhood and what it was like back in the day. So this was dedicated to artists in the neighborhood. Here's another photo of my neighbor, Mario. So you understand, throughout this process, I spent a lot of time with my neighbors, and Mario, we spent a lot of time with Mario. I think it was 4 hours. Yeah. I felt like I was in Forrest Gump, and I saw his life in a good way. But Mario had a lot to say. He's a historian about the neighborhood in his own right. And that's him. He's holding a photo of himself graduating elementary school, and that's him on Avenue D, on his block where he grew up. So I think his mom took that photo too. So these are just all little vignettes or snippets of what this yearbook may look like. Not sure yet. Another submission was made from Camille, who is the Tenants Association president at Baruch Houses. This was her sister's quinceañera, I was going to say prom. But it also inspired me to do more outreach, and I had another crazy idea. I was like, why don't we make a Lower East Side prom and get all my neighbors to invite their friends to come and be a part of this yearbook? And that's what I did. I made a prom, and one of my students from the girls' club held down the photo booth. So these are some portraits she made during prom. And people were really excited. They even went on their Facebook and was like, look at me back in the day. So everyone's ready to share their story and participate in this yearbook. Along with that, I shared more about the project. Like Julie said earlier, this project is supported by the Magnum Foundation. And we asked folks to just share with us during prom, like reflecting about, what the neighborhood was like. So there's Aman and I just recording a moment of their history in the neighborhood. But ending my presentation, I want to leave you all with a slideshow of photos, but it was also an interview we did with an amazing poet and artist. His name is Ricky. He lives on the Lower East Side. And you'll hear Aman's voice asking Ricky what are some of the misconceptions of living in public housing. So I'm going to leave you all with that.
A big, not a big, but just a misconception of the Lower East Side. People may not understand.
The misconception people have of the Lower East Side is that people here are angry and resentful. People here are suffering with addiction or angry New Yorkers, so on and so forth. This community has produced some of the most intelligent young men and women, some of the most famous poets, Miguel Piñero, who I knew died on the streets. I watched as his ashes were scattered on the Lower East Side, as he requested in his poem, The Lower East Side. People assume that people living in New York City housing are lazy and want to be given and feel that they are entitled. It's the wrong impression. It is a stereotype that has been plaguing the community. I moved into this community ashamed I was living in New York City housing, to the point where I am proud of being able to accomplish the things that I've accomplished here. I've blossomed in New York City housing. I am indebted to the ability to afford to live in Manhattan, which I have watched become more and more uninclusive, more restrictive. The people that made this community are being pushed out of this community, and I'm an advocate for fighting for the community. It's the only place where I know I can walk through the neighborhood and have young people say, "Hi, Mr. Hi, Ricky," and so on and so. People call me by name and people know me. It's home.
All right. So thank you, everyone, for listening to my journey and story. If you have any questions, let me know.
Great.
All right.
Okay, Q&A. Do you have any questions or comments for Destiny? Hands up. Yeah, all right. Start here, I'll come to you next. We use the mic for the recording, but please also speak up.
For your collages, are you printing the photos, cutting them out by hand, by scissors, or are you using like an electronic software like Photoshop? Like, what is your process with creating your collages?
I have done everything by hand just because I'm trying to get away from being on the computer so much, and also like the collages that you saw, like in the way we were in the punk book, that was all printed 4x6 prints that we made and cut out and glued onto the pages. So very hands-on, yeah.
Well, first of all, I just thought it was like really beautiful and inspiring, the whole thing. But I was wondering if there's any kind of like punk stuff now that you've been kind of going to or have been excited about.
Oh yeah, there's so much happening right now.
Sorry, yeah.
Oh yeah.
The question is there any punk stuff going on now? There's
There's a lot of punk stuff happening right now. I would follow, there's this Instagram called Save Project Reach. They're in Chinatown, the venue, and they host a lot of punk shows. Also TVI is another venue that you can, and then Latino Punk Fest that was just released is happening. That's not until this summer in July, but you can follow them on Instagram to check out some of their shows. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Destiny. What kind of are you using different cameras like film and digital, or you
So yeah, in
to do your projects?
Yeah, in the beginning that you saw, those were film photos, but honestly, it doesn't matter what the camera is. It could be my phone, it could be a film camera, whatever camera. But yeah, so in this last slideshow, that was all film photos, because I didn't even mention that, but that was through a artist residency that I did with some of my students and community members. So all the photos are not only mine, but they're also some of my students and some of the mothers in the neighborhood. So yeah, it's just a mixture. Yeah.
You're good at black and white, but you made me think of something I hadn't thought of with you before when you talked about looking at Boogie's depiction of public housing, and then you were like, that's not my experience. Is there anything you feel about the way you put color into what it is to be at home in public housing?
Yeah, I think just even reflecting back at the slideshow that I made, I think the way that but like the light, and I want to show the positive side, which is most of the feelings that I have growing up in public housing on the Lower East Side, and I think you feel that the most in the color photos that I made. So yeah, I would agree with you on that.
Hi, Destiny. When do you know, for your collages that you've created, when do you know that one of the collages is complete in like your eyes?
When the whole page is full.
Cool. Thanks.
I don't know, it just feels right. It just has to feel right to you. But honestly, I just like to fill the whole page. I usually just I don't glue everything down right away. Like I'll move it around and see what feels like balanced on the page. But I like to take up space in the whole page. Yeah.
Hello, thank you so much for sharing all your beautiful stories and experiences. I currently live in Lower East Side. Is there like any like specific events or like places that I should definitely go in Lower East Side? Well, like is there any like anything that
It just depends on what kind of events you want to go to, I guess. Stay in touch with me on Instagram. I share a lot of things that are going on in the neighborhood on my stories. So if you want to tune in to what's happening, you can just stay in touch. Yeah.
I just have one question. Can you talk about your process of making ideas tangible? Because we met just a few years ago, and I was curious to how you did it, and now we collaborate, and I'm like, oh, that's how you do it. But there are times where, like say for the prom, for example, that happened in just in a few days. So you have this idea, and then it seems like chaos, and then you're like, I don't know how I'm going to do it, and then the place is packed. So, how do you go about making all of these, incredible things
The
happen?
idea comes to life with some of the two women that are right next to you. Zero and Roxy, they are... I can't do it alone. I have a tribe of people who hold me down, and I'm like, hey, I can't do it all. Can you help me do this? But yeah, it takes a village to do that kind of thing. But also, when I do something, I do it to the fullest capacity. So I'm on the phone calling people, I'm emailing them, I'm texting them, because I want them to get there. Even if during prom, it was cold, and I was people were like, I don't know if I'm going. It's literally across the street from your house. You can come. And then they end up showing up, but it's just I had to call. A text wasn't gonna do it for some of the seniors in the neighborhood. That they want that personal phone call. And Zero knows. She sat with me for an hour. I was calling 20, 30 people on the phone, talking with them for 20 minutes each, because they want to talk about their life too, on top of what I'm inviting them to. But yeah, that's part of the process. You really got to spend the time with people, so.
Destiny, thank you again for presenting your work. It was incredibly beautiful. Right now, I kind of relate a little bit with the background. Also grew up in New York and also Mexican, and kind of at this stage of my life, I'm thinking about I would really like to do my art more and just kind of even sustain that and live off of that. I was wondering what your balance is currently. Are you only involved in photography? Do you also have to do the odd job? I know you're still at the girls club, and how has that changed over the years?
So yeah, I think I didn't express this earlier, but in college, my professor was like, yeah, I got this grant to go to Antarctica and like be on this boat and take photos of scientists. And I'm like, what? What's a grant? What does that mean? And I asked those questions. I'm like, wow, you can get money to have an idea and make it happen. So at a very young age, at 19, the light bulb went off and I was looking for like grants and fellowships. And that's how I, built like all the things that you've seen that I've done was through me just researching and being like, oh yeah, I have this idea. Can they support this idea that I have? But yeah, now I'm not full-time teaching. I only teach 1 day a week, high school class, and then I did have the Magnum Fellowship for some time, but I no longer have it, so now I'm applying to more grants, and I'm just praying that they continue to support the project. But yeah, I'm not sure. I'm a go-with-the-flow person, so we will see where it will take me. I don't really have an answer for you, but I just think if you're passionate about the things that ideas you want to come to life, I think if you pursue that, the doors will open.
Hello. Just want to say first, I'm really inspired by all the photography you do at punk shows. I was also very much inspired by the community around Project Reach because I definitely go to a lot of shows there. But I just want to ask how, definitely, do you have any advice for very young artists that are trying to develop a community? It seems like you have a really strong tie with like the neighborhood you already live in. But how about for just young artists that are very new to like the New York landscape? How do you suggest them to build a community to find people that have common stuff with them?
Well, so I think the punk book's a perfect example because when I was going to those shows, I didn't know anyone except for my friend who invited me to the show. So having the camera was a way to talk to people. And then they started seeing me at like every show. And they're like, oh, that's the girl that taking the photos. Can you send me the photos? And then after a certain amount of time, it just became like we had a connection. Then it evolved to years on, they kept seeing me, and then it's family now. So it just takes time. I think that kind of thing just takes time to like build community. It took me 6 years. Now I'm like, the people that you see in the book, I've seen grown up and now we're fam, but it's a lot of time to build that. But if you really love what you do, it'll happen.
Hi. Hey.
Hello.
Oh my God. First of all, I just want to kind of like congratulate you, or I don't know, just compliment you on this presentation. Just your personality really shined through, and it was just so warm and friendly. Like, I'm pretty sure everyone in here wants to be your friend because you were just so.
You don't understand. I was having a breakdown before I did this presentation. I call all my friends. I'm like, I don't know if I'll be able to do this. Amon knows I was calling him every day.
And that just inspires me even more. Just hearing you saying that is so humble and
I'm like, I just
genuine.
gotta be real. Like,
Yeah.
It's hard to do this, but
it communicated really well. And even in your work, you can see that, like, just communicate through that personality that you have. And it's like no wonder that you were able to, capture these different scenarios and people so well because of just who you are. So that is something that inspires me a lot, to stay true to that and lean into that instead of trying to mold yourself into whatever space you're in. So that's something. A few things I want to know. Let me just kind of rack my brain. First of all, the family restaurant in San Antonio, is that still around?
I wish
the
it
empanadas
was.
looked
No,
really good.
Everyone, all my aunts, uncles, they grew up in that restaurant. No one wanted to take over. They're like, I'm done.
I get it. I was
Yeah.
gonna text my family
But
go.
You know what's cool? The nonprofit. So I don't know if you saw that shot. It's called the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center. But they bought the restaurant, so they're turning it into a culinary arts program. So they're keeping the legacy of my grandparents' restaurant still there. So
That's very
it's
cool.
not going to disappear.
That's amazing.
anytime soon.
Wow.
Yeah.
Another thing I really enjoyed about just the presentation in general was the fact that you were like not afraid to acknowledge the help that you received and just your peers and the people you collaborated with. That is something that, you know, a lot of people, I don't know, I'm not one to say, but a lot of people don't really do that. And the fact that you give credit where it's due is something that is very important as artists, you know, in working together and those things like that. And I guess lastly, I'd want to know is just what's next for Destiny, you know? Like, are we still doing punk shows? Are we still focused on the community? Like, what's going to happen next?
I've become really good at multitasking, kinda. But I'm working on a documentary along with the LES yearbook. I'm working on a documentary that's kind of on pause right now, but about the high school that you saw the yearbook, City as High School. We're going to be following a couple of students towards graduation because it is an unconventional high school. I could show you a little sizzle if you want to see the trailer. Do we have time?
I think we want to see.
I don't know. All right.
Also, thank you for answering
All
my
right,
questions.
we'll do it because I shot it
you.
and it should be seen.
City as School truly saves lives. You know, City as truly is an incubator for legends.
Good afternoon, students and staff. Announcements for today. You cannot expect to live a positive life and around negative people.
Word. If it wasn't for this school, I don't know where I would have been at academically, and I don't even know where I'll be at right now. A lot of people that were sent here was done either injustice through the educational system or whatever reasons they have. It's a lot.
I went into City as really lost. High school feels like purgatory. I mean, I could have graduated last year when I was 16, and if it was any other high school, I would have graduated as soon as possible, but it's hard to leave. And I only started a band or started playing shows or going to shows because I came here and because of the people I met here.
City has a legacy of really incredible artists like Princess Nokia, Yassine Bey, Mackay Pfeiffer, Ad Rock coming through the school building, but we didn't have a music studio, we didn't have a music room.
I started a program called MAD Academy, which is the Music Art Design Academy. We hook students up with recording time, artist development. They are the future and the current face of New York culture and music, so I love you all.
I do want to pursue things where school, you know, might get in the way. I'm in a band, so we have interviews, we have shows. I think I've had a lot of moments where, you know, emotions get in the way of me coming to school, but we all work together to create projects and make music. And for me, it's really been a place where I could be myself. I've been making music since I was very young, so I've kind of been able to share that with other people.
I came to City as out of necessity. You know, I used to skip school to go record and go to studios and just do what I liked doing. So if I could come to school and make music, that would be great. And then I just got me here.
City as School is the only one of its kind. I have sometimes described it as the most radical school in America. Some might say the most radical school in the world.
So that's what I'm up to.
Okay, we have a little more time. Any more questions or comments? Hands up. Yes.
I have a question. When you started your photographing the punk shows and everything like that, assumingly you weren't signed with any kind of publication or anything like that, how did you go about getting into the shows and getting people to trust you in your photography? And along with that, what were some setbacks that you learned from and strive past to achieve the body of work that you did end up making?
Yeah, at first, you know, punks aren't as inviting as you think. So some of the shows that I went to, people like grilled me. They're like, what are you doing here? Like, who are you, like you said, who are you shooting for? Because I had my camera, my flash connected to it. And then sometimes I would just like, okay, you know what? I'm not gonna shoot at this show. I'm just gonna, be in the crowd. And then they start seeing me come to like more and more shows. And then they're like, oh, that's the girl with the camera. And then I would start making photos. And then I'd start, as I became, closer with some of the bandmates and that kind of thing, I started bringing my bigger equipment. So it just took time. It took years. Like, it didn't happen overnight. Like, this was 6 years of me going to shows like every other night. So yeah, it just takes a lot of time to get the trust of folks and wanting to know, like, what are you doing? What is your purpose? Why are you here? Kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
Hey, how's it going? I'm thinking about if there are any times where you struggle with like misrepresenting people in these communities, and if so, how do you like deal with that conflict?
I'm going to talk about one. It's not, I guess it is misrepresenting, but it was at Project Reach, and this band was playing. I'm not going to mention their name, and the vocalist was hanging on this red pipe. And that ended up getting the venue a really big fine because I posted the photo on my Instagram and somebody saw that photo, reported it, and then the venue ended up having to pay like a $2,000 fine. So that made me realize to be more conscious about like what am I sharing online, and luckily, I have a lot of love in the community, and no one came like towards me and like bashing me about like, why did you share that photo? But that made me more aware of like what I'm posting and sharing online before I do that. I stop and think. I'm like, is this gonna get a venue in trouble? Is it gonna get somebody else like in trouble? So it's just like all those things come up now, like before I post anything. And before, whereas I was just like freely posting, I'm like, oh yeah, I love sharing the crowd and the bands, but then it really like opened up my eyes to be like, I don't want to be the cause of someone having to like make a huge fine and shutting the, potentially like shutting the venue down. Like, I don't want to be the cause of that. So that was definitely a eye-opening moment.
Okay, last sweep of the room. Let's hear it for Destiny. Thank you so much.